The story takes place in a quiet little village, where we meet a young seamstress named Barbara. She lives alone, ever since her mother passed away, and now runs her late mother's small tailoring shop. Her days are spent surrounded by fabric, needles, and thread, carrying on the family trade. One morning, she sets out on a special assignment. A widow named Engel is getting married, and Barbara has been chosen to tailor her wedding dress. Driving her small car through winding forest roads and across an old bridge, Barbara finally arrives at the client's home. But Engel, impatient and temperamental, keeps scolding Barbara for arriving late. As Barbara works on the buttons at the back of the gown, Engel goes on, even comparing her to Barbara's late mother, claiming the older woman was far more disciplined. The insults push Barbara's patience to the edge, and in a sudden slip of frustration, her needle pricks Engel's skin, earning her a furious shout. Flustered, Barbara almost drops one of the buttons down a narrow ventilation shaft. When she bends to retrieve it, Engel snaps again, calling her clumsy. This time, Barbara calmly lets the button fall, as if on purpose. Without any spares, she's ordered to return to her shop to get replacements and come back right away.
No. Get my fucking button, you
Frustrated but obedient, Barbara drives off once again through the forest. Then, in the middle of a desolate road, she spots two motorbikes sprawled on the ground, wrecked from what looks like a crash. She pulls over and steps closer. There are two men lying on the road, badly injured but still alive. Around them are scattered bags of drugs, two pistols, and a large suitcase that both of them are desperately trying to reach. No one knows exactly what she's thinking. Calmly, Barbara opens her sewing kit, takes out two threads, and stretches them toward the wounded men. Too weak to move, they just stare at her, confused. Then it becomes clear that Barbara is connecting them with her thread, sewing an invisible line between them. When she's done, she quietly gets back into her car and starts the engine. Moments later, the threads tighten, pulling each man's pistol into his hand. Both men accidentally shoot each other. Barbara watches it all unfold from a distance. Two lives end, just like that. She steps out, walks over, and takes the suitcase. This is so torn. At this point, it's clear, Barbara isn't just a tailor. She's a genius, someone with the mind of an engineer, precise and calculating in ways no ordinary person could be. But as she drives away from the scene, a sudden thought strikes her. One of her threads is still there, and a needle has snapped off, left behind. Panicked, Barbara rushes back to the crash site to retrieve her missing needle. If she leaves it behind, it could easily become the piece of evidence that leads the police straight to her. After searching the scene, she finally finds it lodged deep in the hand of the man wearing the helmet. But before she can take it, he suddenly moves. He's still alive. Startled, Barbara freezes. The man struggles, reaching for his gun. In a moment of chaos, Barbara loses her grip on the needle and scrambles to safety. Realizing she has no other choice, she regains control of the situation. She cleans up the area, erases what she can, and decides to take the wounded man with her. The other body is left behind on the road, with no one noticing the bent needle lying there, crushed beneath a tire. When Barbara finally arrives home, she drags the unconscious man inside. Using rope, she ties him tightly, pulling his limp body up to the attic to keep him hidden until she can figure out what to do next. Just then, Engel arrives. Barbara has no choice but to compose herself, step outside, and get back to work. She carefully sews the missing buttons onto the wedding gown, and once Engel is satisfied and leaves, Barbara finally breathes again. She heads back upstairs to deal with the man in the helmet, who's now conscious. Slowly, he begins to talk. He and the other man, whose name was Joshua, were in the middle of a drug deal. The man in the helmet was the buyer, and Joshua was the dealer. But things went wrong when Joshua tried to run off with a suitcase full of cash. The two ended up in a violent chase that ended in gunfire. Now, with Joshua dead, the man warns Barbara about what's coming. Joshua's father is a ruthless drug lord, known for his brutality. And once he learns his son is dead, he won't stop until he finds the people responsible. That means not just the man in the helmet, but Barbara too. Barbara could have run away, but she couldn't bring herself to leave her mother's old house. Instead, she decided to stay and face whatever was coming. Using nothing but her needle, thread, and a dangerously sharp mind, Barbara began preparing for the drug lord's arrival. She set up a trap with careful precision, turning the tied-up man in the helmet and a dangling pistol into the centerpiece of her plan. Every detail depended on timing, tension, and the pull of a single thread. When everything was ready, Barbara hid behind a table and waited. Soon, the front door creaked open. The man stepped inside, unaware that he had already triggered the trap. A single tug on the thread sent the man in the helmet tumbling from the stairs. The pistol snapped loose, sliding across the floor and landing in the intruder's hand. The next pull tightened another string, making the gun fire, right at the helpless man in the helmet. It looked like a perfect setup, a murder committed by mistake. Barbara held her breath in the dark, terrified the plan might fail. And then it did. The gun clicked empty. No bullets. The trap had failed completely. Barbara bolted out the back door and ran into the forest. But the drug lord was faster. He chased her through the trees and shot her in the leg, sending her crashing to the ground. Crawling, gasping, Barbara tried to reach for anything she could use. But the man calmly approached, pulled out his own thread, and wrapped it around her neck. With a cold, deliberate motion, he strangled her until she stopped moving. When it was over, he opened the suitcase Barbara had killed for. Inside was money and a hidden explosive, armed with a sensor that would detonate the moment the cash was removed. He noticed it in time, closed the lid, and left the scene without a word. The story rewinds to an earlier moment, back to the crossroads where Barbara stands frozen, weighing her choices, whether to take the suitcase lying in the middle of the road or walk away. In this second path, she chooses differently. Instead of keeping the money, Barbara decides to do the right thing and report the incident to the police. She makes a quick call, explaining that she's found 2 injured men after what looks like a crash. Not long after, the only officer in the small town arrives, a frail, elderly woman who doubles as the village's moral compass. She inspects the scene, checks the victims, and immediately senses that the suitcase is missing. And Barbara, who thought she'd hidden it safely in her car trunk, doesn't realize the old cop is sharper than she looks. Before long, the officer finds the suitcase and takes it back as evidence. Now Barbara finds herself handcuffed inside the small police station, sitting beside the 2 men from the crash. When the officer questions what really happened, Joshua calmly says it doesn't matter. What matters now is that they all need to get out before his father shows up. But the old policewoman doesn't take him seriously. She's more preoccupied with another task happening just next door, a wedding ceremony for Engel which she's also officiating. Yes, in this small town, the local cop is also the priest. Realizing time is running out, Barbara starts plotting her escape. Her sharp mind kicks into overdrive when she notices the handcuff keys sitting on a table nearby. Quietly, she signals the man in the helmet to work with her. Using her needle, thread, and a piece of paper, Barbara constructs a makeshift dart launcher. She then instructs the man to remove his belt and shoelaces to use as tools for reaching the keys. After several failed attempts, he finally manages to throw his belt close enough. Now it's Barbara's turn. She grips the needle in her mouth, aims carefully, and launches it. The thread wraps around the key ring perfectly. All that's left is for the man to pull, and their freedom is within reach. At the same time, in the next room, Engel is struggling with her dress. The buttons are gone, and in desperation, she's tried to hold it together with a safety pin, but this pin keeps coming loose and pricking her skin. Frustrated and in pain, she lashes out, furious at the imperfection. Wanting everything to be flawless, Engel calls out to the elderly policewoman, who suddenly remembers Barbara waiting in the holding room next door. So she steps in right at the moment when Barbara and the man in the helmet are about to grab the handcuff keys. And just like that, their escape plan falls apart. Instead of freedom, Barbara is dragged into the next room to help fix Engel's dress. She quickly sews the missing buttons, finishes the job, and is escorted back to her seat, and this time with the handcuff keys placed on a coat rack within sight but out of easy reach. Still determined, Barbara tries again. The man throws his belt toward the keys, landing a perfect hit. Now it's Barbara's turn. Using her needle and thread, she aims carefully and flicks it toward the keyhole. Against all odds, she succeeds. The man in the helmet finally manages to grab the keys and unlocks himself. But instead of helping Barbara, he betrays her. He bolts from the room, taking the suitcase with him and tossing the keys where no one can find them. Barbara refuses to give up. Thinking fast, she spots a CCTV camera cable nearby. She rips it out of the wall, strips the wire, and attaches it to her thread, another improvised plan forming in her head. Her goal is to use the electric current as a weapon. But before she can act, the drug lord storms into the station, gunning down the elderly policewoman before she can draw her weapon. He barges into the next room and finds his son still handcuffed. Just as he turns his gun toward Barbara, the policewoman who's barely alive makes one last move. With a silent exchange of glances, she and Barbara share a desperate understanding. The officer shoves the live cable into the socket. Electricity surges through the room. The shock incapacitates the drug lord, but not before he opens fire. Bullets tear into Barbara's stomach. She collapses, motionless, as the old officer survives with only minor injuries thanks to her bulletproof vest. When the smoke clears, Barbara lies lifeless. The drug lord is unconscious, the man in the helmet has escaped with the money, and the others can only stare, powerless to change what's happened. Time rewinds once more, pulling us back to that same moment of hesitation, when Barbara is still standing by the road, unsure of what to do. But this time, in the third version of her fate, she chooses a different path. She decides to walk away and not get involved. But as she drives back toward home, she passes by her mother's old tailor shop, now worn down and lifeless. The sight of it hits her hard. Maybe it's guilt, or maybe it's desperation, but Barbara turns the car around. She goes back for the suitcase. But when she arrives, the drug lord is already on the scene. Barbara hides, frozen, as she witnesses him murder the man in the helmet right before her eyes. Terrified, she flees, speeding off to a small roadside restaurant to find safety. Moments later, the drug lord and his son Joshua walk in after her. Barbara braces herself, certain that this is the end. But to her surprise, the man doesn't attack. Instead, he calmly asks for her help. Joshua's been injured, and he needs her skills as a tailor. Inside the restroom, Barbara stitches Joshua's wound in tense silence. As she works, Joshua starts to open up. He tells her about his father, about the cruelty and fear that surrounds him, about how his life has been nothing but pain under his father's control. For the first time, Barbara feels sympathy. Quietly, she hands Joshua a spool of red thread. She tells him to hold onto it. Then, with slow, deliberate care, she loops that same red thread around the pistol resting in his father's bag. Next, she takes out a spool of blue thread and begins weaving it across the room, pretending to dance and play with it like a harmless distraction.
Oh, the sewing machine, pedal and wheel, the wheel by day, sew by night, and sew hand. If I didn't have my son, the lever and bobbin, a pedal and wheel,
You done?
When she's done, she hands Joshua the blue thread as well. Now he holds the red and the blue one in each hand. Earlier, Barbara told him what to do when the time came. When everything lines up, all he'll need to do is pull. Just as the tension builds, Engel suddenly appears again, showing up to complain about her dress. Barbara, keeping her composure, steps out of the room to fix the missing buttons. This is the moment when the drug lord finally shows his true nature. He forces his son Joshua to make an unthinkable choice, either kill Barbara with his own hands or end his own life with a knife. Joshua hesitates, trembling, torn between fear and guilt. Then, in a split-second decision, he looks toward Barbara and pulls both threads just as she instructed. The tension from the strings triggers the mechanism she set up earlier, tugging at the pistol in his father's bag. The gun rises, turns, and fires. A single shot, followed by another. And before the drug lord even understands what's happened, he collapses. Killed by his own son, all according to Barbara's quiet, calculated plan. But instead of relief, what comes next reveals who Barbara truly is. She takes the suitcase of money for herself and walks away, leaving Joshua behind in shock and heartbreak. Joshua tries to chase after her, dragging his wounded leg, fighting through the pain. But Barbara is already gone, speeding home with her prize. When she finally arrives, she opens the suitcase, her eyes lighting up as she starts counting the bundles of cash one by one. Then the suitcase explodes. The same sensor-triggered bomb that once killed others now claims her too. Barbara's greed seals her fate, ending her life in an instant. And once again, time rewinds. But this time, not to the crime scene, not to the forest or the road, but back to a quiet, seemingly insignificant moment. The moment when Barbara almost dropped a button into the vent. She pauses, takes a breath, and decides against it. She keeps the button in her hand. That single act changes everything. Without needing to return home for a spare, she never crosses paths with the two strangers, never meets Joshua, never gets involved in the chaos that follows. Later, on her way back, she stops at a crossroads and encounters the same drug lord, only now, he's just a man asking for directions. Barbara tenses up, expecting the worst. But instead of pulling a gun, he pulls out a wad of cash. He thanks her for the help and hands her 3 stacks of bills as a simple reward for showing him the way. And that's it. A story that began with a dropped button comes full circle, showing how one small decision can change everything, even between life and death. So the moral of the story is, if you drop a button, just pick it up, because apparently that is the difference between living your life normally or accidentally becoming a criminal sewing ninja mastermind.